I had a trainee get up and leave in the middle of a shift after taking their first active call. She had only had calls of people reporting things that had already happened and the like. She took a call with an active domestic fight going on over the phone. Yelling, cursing, screaming, threatening, physical altercations. She took the call well, but I guess she decided that type of thing was too intense for her. I've taken some really rough calls, none of them made me want to quit, though. I made the choice to leave because the professional environment was just so toxic at the agency I was at. I worked answering medical alarm calls for a while. Think, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Guy hits his GPS button. When I answer the call he says, sorry, just an accident. My brother and I just stabbed a hooker. And hung it up. I tried to call back while I had two supervisors listen to the call, everything was recorded, and verify what I heard so we could call police with the GPS location of the call. No answer. I'll never forget his name. I googled it for weeks to see if he was arrested. Still haunts me. It was 2.5 years ago. I quit a few weeks after. We had several dispatchers and officers quit after we had an active shooter, where one officer died and several were wounded. Lots of media coverage and stress. There was a police academy going on at the time and lots of people in the academy dropped out too. It was rough. I had a trainee quit after taking a domestic disturbance hostage situation call that lasted for hours. She went to the bathroom for like 45 minutes and I sent the supervisor to check on her. She had a bleeding ulcer and had to be transported to the hospital. Quit the next day. Stress sucks. My little brother is a first responder and firefighter and he was on a ride along with our local police. This happened in August 2019, it was like 8 p.m. if I remember correctly. He was chit-chatting with the officer. In our town nothing really exciting happens, when they get a 911 dispatcher on the radio. They called over the code and address and off they went. When they got to the house the police officer looked at my brother and said, "Have you ever seen a dead body?" As my brother is a firefighter he's seen a lot so he says, "Yes." When they walk into the house there is blood everywhere. All through the kitchen, up the stairs, in the bedroom, bathroom and ending in the living room. They found this man in his mid-60s in an Indian prayer stance in front of his recliner chair, blood all around him. After everything is said and done, he finds out that this poor man was cooking dinner when he felt like he had pooped himself so he went upstairs to the bathroom where he then tried to poop and felt what he thought as feces coming out. When he went to wipe it was extremely painful and bloody. He then called 911 and began to cry and beg the dispatcher to send help as he is wandering through his house. As he was wailing through his house and saying over and over again he didn't want to die he was bleeding out. He settled in the living room and he fell to his knees, dispatcher still on the phone, and began to pray. He had been dead for 10 minutes in this stance by the time they got there. From what my brother said, he had ended up pushing his organs out of his butt somehow. He had no family and his wife had died 3 years before this. I wanted to be a police officer, but after hearing this story, I settled on being an English teacher. I'm very sorry to the 911 dispatcher that had to hear the last few minutes of this man's death because I couldn't have done it. My sister was a 911 operator for about a year. She left for several reasons but shortly before she left she took a call from someone in a burning flat. Basically they woke up in the midst of it and couldn't get out. She listened to them scream from being burned up. She took another job shortly after. That's the one she always says was the worst one she had. Turned out it was arson. Set by petrol. My experience is limited to a smaller department, and because of that I had a supervisor that was absolutely toxic and would openly retaliate if you so much disagreed with them. At one point I was the second most senior person and found myself working overnights because of a disagreement. The job already breeds anxiety. When you're not busy you can't help but wonder what's going to come over the line next. Even at a small department I still managed to deal with pretty much everything but the worst were the suicide callers. I talked down more than 5 but I lost 2. Both happened almost as soon as I picked up the phone, and give me a name and a location and it happened before you could get anything other than that. And you can't hang up the phone until an officer arrives, so as a dispatcher there's really nothing you can do but listen. Those are the ones that stick with you. There's some people that you actually help, but unfortunately those aren't the ones that I remember. Those aren't the ones that wake me up in the middle of the night. Some people are built for that and can leave that at work somehow, but I'm not one of them. I ultimately left the job because of the management and just burnout and fatigue. I'm lucky that I did because I don't think I would have stayed healthy for very long. Because even now I can point to the job and say that the stress caused by it is what started my anxiety, and I gained over 100 pounds in 4 years because of the stress, inconsistent schedules and night shifts. I was lucky enough to enter another field and become a senior software developer, but I have nothing but respect for dispatchers. I hope all departments adopt policy of debriefing and a focus on mental health after active incidents for both the officers and the dispatchers, because for some reason they are often forgotten. As an EMT, I once worked with a former firefighter who left his profession and went to wait tables because of a 911 call. He was called to a house, but the fire department got there 5 minutes before police could. In the house were a dad and toddler boy. Dad was the one who called 911, saying he was going to kill the kid. He was so mad. So the firefighter is at the door, but his sergeant is not letting them go in without police due to the possible danger of the situation. He could hear the boy screaming those death screams of someone who's really in pain. After a few minutes he decides, F it, he's going in anyways, and breaks down the door. He gets the door open just as police show up, and they find the boy basically boiled from the waist down. While they were outside, the dad is holding this kid under scalding water in the tub. The kid died from his injuries after a long stay in the hospital. The firefighter was reprimanded for breaking protocol and still feels like everything was his fault for not saving the boy faster. It's always the kids that get to you. Brandy Worley's call to 911 would make me quit. For those who aren't familiar, she very matter-of-fact explained to the 911 operator that she stabbed her small children to death. The father was actually a Reddit user who posted about the marital issues on Reddit leading up to this incident. Not a 911 operator but a doctor. Was covering an ER night shift when EMS radios in to tell us they are inbound with a patient who suffered an eye injury. I'm thinking, since the person called an ambulance, it must be pretty bad, like, spilled muriatic acid all over my face or, fell and landed eyeball first into a fork bad. They wheel her in 10 minutes later and she looked completely fine. When I ask what happened, and I kid you not, she says, I got a cat hair in my eye. An ambulance ride for a hair in her eye. Icing on the cake, she was a Medicaid patient. $2,000 and change of your tax dollars at work, for something that could have been solved at home with a penny's worth of tap water. A few days ago there was a house fire here in Germany. My team and I had to be quick since the whole house was in flames. We saved the mother and the son, however his sister was missing. I looked for her and saw her burn to death in front of me. I couldn't do anything and it still haunts me. However, I won't ever quit my job. I've been dedicating my whole life to be a firefighter and I love it. I was going through the application process to be a 911 dispatcher. One of the meetings we were required to attend, they played a recording of a phone call. A teenager had killed his mother and younger sister. The boy's voice was so steady and lifeless, and the dispatcher was so level-headed and got all the information they needed and also made sure the boy was okay. That call was the reason I discontinued the application. If I couldn't handle a recording, I doubt I would be able to handle the real thing. I have so much respect for dispatchers. You're all amazing people. My cousin's husband told me this since he doesn't have an account. He answered a call around 12:30 in the morning. Only breathing was heard on the other line, and he asked how he could help and asking if they are all right while getting the location of the call from the cell tower. It was supposedly coming from an area that is pretty much only woods around a main highway. Eventually a woman's voice came over the line between huffing and puffing about she thinks she lost them. When he asked who and where she is so he can send help, she shushes him. She tells him that she is going to go down the little hole to see if they miss her. He hears other people in the background yelling, cursing, and yelling a woman's name. Unfortunately, it seems that someone found her and she was screaming horribly while they must have beaten her, and whatever else, killing her in the end because a male voice picked up the phone and said, "The witch is dead," and hung up. Her body was found in the woods a few days later, badly bruised and assaulted. The story is that she was a woman who was trying to escape a sex trafficking group, but sadly failed. He had nightmares for a few weeks about hearing his wife's voice or his daughter's voice over the phone in her place. I don't know if they found the men or not, and this was some years ago too, 10 or 15. For me, suicide calls were the worst. It's the screams that do it, but those are more tragic than horrifying. Actual horror though, I had a call for a welfare check on an elderly couple that no one had been able to get in contact with for a few days. Finally a friend or relative came to the house to check on them. Their cars were home and the doors were locked, but they couldn't see or hear anything. All in all, nothing too out of the ordinary. We get these calls all the time. I send the units thinking, they're probably just out of town or maybe already at the hospital somewhere. PD and fire get on scene and start checking. Ordinarily, if nothing obviously suspicious is present, they want force entry, but thank God this time they did. When they went to check the residence, they found the elderly woman in bed with her dead husband. It turns out that she's completely bedridden. He was her caretaker. He passes away in his sleep one night and she can't get out of bed to get to a phone. So she has to lay there next to her dead husband for the better part of 5 days as he slowly decomposes before we arrived. I spoke with the units after and she had basically lost her mind over those few days and was talking and having a conversation with her dead husband like he was still alive. Just thinking of what she must have gone through gave me chills. I'm glad it had a good outcome, but another day or so and she'd have passed away too.